Are you ready for a pixie book? Come on and listen in. With stories full of wonder, it's time now to begin. Hello there, children. How are you today? I have a very special story just for you. It's about a young girl who thought she needed special shoes to be happy. Are we all comfy and ready to begin? Here we go. The Red Shoes. Once upon a time, there was a young girl named Karen. Even though her family was very poor, they always tried their best to give Karen everything she ever needed. They raised her to be kind and generous. Even though they had very little, there were other families who had even less. Every day, Karen would walk to school and pass by a shoe store with bright red shoes in the window. "Can I have those, Mom?" Karen would ask her mother. "No, Karen, your black shoes are fine," said Karen's mom. "But they are old and black and ugly," Karen would whine. "Yes, but they are comfy and will last," her mom said. One year, before her birthday, Karen's parents saved enough money to give her a gift. "Spend it on something special," her father said. On her way to school the next day, Karen stopped at the shoe store and used her birthday money to buy the red shoes she had wanted for years. The lady at the store said they only had the small size of the shoes, but Karen didn't care. She wanted the shoes and would make her feet fit. Karen put her old black shoes in her backpack and put on her new bright red shoes. As soon as she put them on, she could not stop smiling. The rest of the walk to school, she could tell everyone was looking at her and admiring her shoes. As she walked by, compliments filled her ears. "Wow, look at those shoes. How beautiful. Those are some great dancing shoes." When she got to school, all Karen could think about was her new red shoes. During her classes, when she was supposed to be learning, she was drawing and doodling her shoes. She was busy thinking about her shoes. She didn't listen when her teacher said there would be a test the next day. That day, when she walked home, all she could think about were her shoes. Again, people oohed and awed about her beautiful red shoes. Karen thought about her shoes throughout the evening when she was supposed to be studying for the test. Karen thought about her shoes at night when she closed her eyes at bedtime, and even thought about the red shoes while dreaming. The next morning, Karen's feet hurt from wearing her new shoes all day, but she didn't care. Karen put them back on and walked to school. Listening to everyone's compliments made Karen smile and believe she was beautiful. Even though her feet hurt, she felt like the most beautiful girl in the world. When she got to school, she sat at her desk and was handed the test. I didn't know there was a test today," she told her teacher as she looked around at the other kids writing down the answers. "Well, do your best," the teacher said. Karen tried to focus, but her feet were hurting too much. She only managed to write her name when the time was up. Karen was sad at lunch and was worried about what her parents would say about her test. But then, one of the popular girls came up to her and said, "Wow, I like your shoes. I'm having a party on Saturday. Do you want to come?" Karen said yes excitedly and accepted the invitation. Karen was happy again. Her new shoes got her invited to her first party. These shoes were even better than she thought. They must be magic shoes. She didn't care that her feet were hurting with every step she took. After school, Karen ran home as fast as she could, thinking about her shoes. When she got home, she took her shoes off to find her feet were blistered, red, and sore. She asked her mom for a hot foot bath to soothe her feet. That night, Karen went to sleep thinking about her shoes. The next morning, Karen got ready for the party. She very carefully put her shoes on and began walking to the girls' house for the party. But Karen could barely walk. With every step, tears fell from her eyes. Finally, Karen couldn't take it. She sat on the side of the road crying. "Excuse me, why are you crying?" a little girl asked Karen. "My shoes are hurting my feet. They don't fit, but I wanted them so bad," Karen cried. "Those are very pretty shoes. I wish I had shoes like that, but I don't have shoes," the little girl said. Karen looked at the little girl's bare feet. They were smaller than Karen's and beaten and bruised from walking barefoot. "Here, do you want them?" Karen asked, taking her red shoes off and giving them to the little girl. "Wow, thanks! Well, they fit perfectly!" the little girl squealed and ran off in her bright new red shoes. Karen pulled out her cell phone and called her mom to bring her the old black shoes she had abandoned a few days ago. Putting them on, Karen walked the rest of the way to the party and danced with her new friends all day. No red shoes, no blisters, no hurting feet. In fact, Karen didn't think of the shoes at all. She just thought about how much fun she was having in her old, comfy black shoes. The end. What do you think, kids? I think Karen was raised well by her parents to be kind and generous. See you next time. If you have a story you'd like to hear, then comment below and I'll ask Storybook if he knows it.
Oh, thank you for the ride, Storybook. Oh, hello, children. Are you ready for a story? So are we. Oh, The Farmer's Story. Once upon a time, there lived a farmer who worked a small plot of land with his wife and young son named Josh. Now, this was in the old days when horses helped till the soil. The farmer had a working horse named Charlie. He was strong and sturdy. Josh's morning chore was to gather hay soggy from the morning dew and carry it over to Charlie, who loved soggy hay. He would eat it all in seconds. Nom, 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 nom. Josh's nightly chore was to go to Charlie's stall and brush him. He would clean his coat from all the mud and dirt. And when Charlie was nice and clean, Josh would gently pat Charlie on the nose, wish him a good night, and close the stall behind him. One morning, as Josh arrived at Charlie's stall with a fresh heaping of breakfast hay, he stopped, dropped the bucket, and let out a scream. The farmer heard the scream and ran over to Josh. "What happened, son?" Josh pointed at Charlie's stall with tears flowing from his eyes. The stall door was open and Charlie was gone. The family searched the area for hours, calling out to Charlie, but he was nowhere to be found. That night, as the farmer sat beside Josh on his bed, Josh was still weeping. "What are we going to do? Oh, this is so terrible." The farmer hugged his son, smiled, and said, "Ah, son, things happen for the best. And the best thing to always do is give thanks for what you have right now." Josh heard his father's words. Well, I'm thankful that you're my father, he said as he slowly closed his eyes and fell asleep. The next morning, Josh woke up to a familiar sound. It was Charlie neighing outside his window. Oh, but wait, whose neigh is that? And that! And that! Josh ran out of the house to discover Charlie happily bucking about with a whole herd of horses. The farmer and his wife joined Josh and joyously stood watching the horses at play. Oh, that was a very busy day. The family had to make room for the new horses. They would sell a few to make money to build a bigger barn for the new horses. Oh, there was a lot of excitement on the farm. That night, as the farmer sat beside Josh on his bed, Josh smiled at his father and said, "We're so lucky. Isn't it wonderful?" The farmer smiled and replied, "Yes, things happen for the best." Josh smiled back and said, "I'm thankful for you and Mama and for the new horses." A week passed, and one day the farmer was taming one of the new horses. The new horse wasn't used to being told what to do and gave the farmer a kick in the shoulder. Oh! The farmer had to go to the hospital for a week. Finally, the farmer was able to come home, but was still bandaged up and wasn't able to work. That night, Josh came to sit by his father's bedside. Oh, Josh was sad and said, "Oh, look at you. Oh, what bad luck." "Remember," replied the father, "things happen for the best." Josh gave it a thought and smiled. "I'm so thankful you're home." The next morning, the family was awakened by loud banging on the door. They all got up and came to the door together. When they opened it, they were surprised to see a number of soldiers standing there. The soldiers looked at the farmer and said, "A war broke out. We're here to recruit you to the king's army." Josh's heart sank. He couldn't even imagine his father going away to war. But before he had time to say anything, the farmer smiled and said, "I'm sorry, but as you can see, I couldn't help you even if I tried." The soldiers saw his wounded shoulder, nodded, and left. When they closed the door, Josh hugged his father. "Oh, we're so lucky. If you'd been healthy, they'd take you off to war." The farmer smiled. Like I said, things happen for the best. All we can do is give thanks for what we have right now. And the family lived happily and thankfully ever after. The end. Oh, I'm so thankful for that story. That was truly the best. And now, bye-bye. Did you like the story? Then click like.
Hello there, children. Do you wish to hear a story? Here's a wonderful story about wishes. Once upon a time, there was an old fisherman. He lived with his wife in a small broken hut by the sea, in the middle of pretty much nowhere. They were very poor. Every day, the fisherman would go out to the sea and wait for the tide to come so he could find fish to bring back home for dinner. One day, as the fisherman sat by the sea, he felt a sudden pull at his line. The fisherman carefully pulled it out of the water, expecting to see an ordinary fish. But what he pulled out was no ordinary fish. Oh no, you see, it was a gold flounder. Do you know what a flounder is? I'll spare you the Google search. A flounder is a flat fish that lives at the bottom of the ocean, and this flounder was shimmering gold with blue sparkling eyes. truly a beautiful thing. The fisherman was quite surprised, but he was even more surprised when the fish started speaking. "Dear fisherman," said the gold flounder, "let me go, please. I'm an enchanted prince, and if you release me, I'll grant you 3 wishes." The fisherman didn't want to return home empty-handed, but he felt sorry for the fish and let him go. Splash! He landed back in the water. "Oh, thank you, dear fisherman. Now, what is your first wish?" The fisherman thought, "My dear wife is always complaining about our run-down hut. Well, now there's a chance to fix it. Well, if you could, I'd like you to fix my home. It's broken, small, and dirty. If you don't mind, that's my wish." The gold flounder nodded. "Very well, it's done. You can go back to your home, dear fisherman. Thank you for sparing my life." When the fisherman got back home, he couldn't believe his eyes. His wife was standing at the door of a brand new cottage with a red roof and green windows. She was very happy. "Oh, dear husband, how did it happen?" The fisherman told her exactly what happened. When he finished, she told him, "If the magical fish could give us this cottage, why not ask for a bigger house with gardens and a car in the driveway?" The fisherman was confused. "Dear, we were given this cottage as a gift, as our first wish. I don't want to anger the magical fish. Why can't we just be satisfied with this house?" "No, husband. Tomorrow you go back to the sea and ask for a bigger house. You saved this prince's life. For sure he won't mind." And so the next day, the fisherman went back to the sea, and when came the tide, so did the flounder. "Dear flounder," he said, "I'm sorry to bother you, but my wife, well, she'd like a bigger house." The flounder nodded. "All right, dear fisherman, that's your second wish." The fisherman walked back to the house, and guess what? Yes, where a cottage once was, now stood a big stone house, surrounded by gardens and a driveway with a brand new car. But his wife was not done yet. "If the fish could grant us this big house, why not ask for a castle with tall towers and 100 rooms, servants and guards and limousines?" "Oh, but my dear wife," said the fisherman, upset, "we already asked for a bigger house, and the fish was nice enough to give us one. We don't need such a grand castle." His wife shook her head. "Go back and ask for a castle." And so the next day he waited for the tide by the sea. "Oh, dear flounder, I'm sorry to bother you again, but my wife wants to be the queen of a castle." The flounder nodded. When the fisherman returned, tuxedo-wearing servants greeted him and escorted him onto a huge driveway with sports cars and limousines, then into a giant castle with the roof made of gold, cooks, and many gardens. His wife sat on a big throne with a golden crown upon her head. "Well, you must be happy now," he said to her. But oh no. "If the fish could give us this castle..." "What could possibly be bigger than a castle? Well, you already have it all, and we were only given 3 wishes." She shook her head. "Nonsense! I am now the queen, and the fish must do as I command. Get him here to live with us as my servant." The fisherman tried to argue, but there was no point. The next day, with a heavy heart, he went back to the sea and sat by the water sad. "Dear magic fish, I'm sorry, but my wife, the queen, wishes that you come live with us and grant her all the wishes she might have forever." The fish stared at the fisherman for a few moments and simply said, "Go home." He dove back into the water and was never seen again. The fisherman went back home, but when he arrived, the castle was gone. No cars or servants or gold-coated doors. Instead, he found his wife sitting on the ground, no crown in sight, next to their old broken hut. "Come, my dear, let's go back home." And so they did, and they lived there together, poor but grateful for each other. The end. Oh, what a magical tale! Say, children, if you met the gold magical flounder and were granted a wish, what would you wish for? Well, take your time and think about it. Bye-bye for now.
Did you like the story? Then click like. Oh, storybook. Kids, you're already here. Oh, have you been waiting for me? Well then, without further ado, let the story begin. Oh, the story of Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, on the outskirts of a forest, there lived a mother and her dearest daughter. The daughter was known in the village as Little Red because she was born with a head full of bright red hair and big, round, reddish cheeks. As Little Red grew up, she spent much of her time in the woods. Now, most would say she had quite the imagination, but for Little Red it seemed perfectly normal to chat with all the friendly animals and sing along with the birds and the bees. On her 8th birthday, Little Red's grandma, who lived on the opposite side of the forest, made her a special red hooded sweater. Little Red loved it and wore it everywhere, and ever since, she's been known as Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Mother called her over to the kitchen. "Oh, dearest, I have a special errand for you. I need you to bring some soup over to Grandma's. She's not feeling well." "Oh, dear, sweet Grandma, of course, I'll go right away." "Now listen," said Mother. "I've heard the neighbors talking about a wolf in the woods, so please stay on the trail and go straight to Grandma's house." "Oh, yes, of course, Mother. I'll reach Grandma's house in a flash and take good care of her." Little Red Riding Hood quickly put on her beloved hooded sweater, took the pot of soup, and set off to Grandma's house. Oh, she loved walking through the forest. There were always new things to discover. She planned to go directly to Grandma's house, but just as she was about to turn onto the trail that led her there, she heard the buzzing of happy bees. Oh, listen to that bee chorus. Wow, they've discovered a field of flowers. I could collect a bouquet of flowers for Grandma. She just loves flowers. Woohoo! And so she put the pot of soup down and joyously began collecting flowers for Grandma. As she did so, she chatted with her new bee friends. I'm sure these flowers will help Grandma feel much better. Say, have any of you ever visited my grandma's garden? It's just down the trail, right beside the creek. Now, it turns out that the bees weren't the only ones listening, for lurking in the shadows was the wily wolf. Oh, poor Grandma is weak from illness, huh? Perhaps I'll go and pay her a visit as well. Yeah,
She'll be my appetizer, and once the girl arrives, I'll eat her as the main course. And ever so quietly, he snuck off towards Grandma's house.
A bit later, when Little Red Riding Hood arrived at Grandma's house holding the pot of soup and bouquet, she discovered that the front door was open. How strange, she thought. Hello, Grandma? She then heard a raspy voice call out,
Yes, my dear, I'm here in the bedroom.
Oh, Grandma, you really do sound ill. Little Red Riding Hood entered the bedroom. Grandma was lying in her bed wearing her sleeping cap and had the covers pulled up to her eyes. And yet, something seemed strange. Grandma, your eyes, they seem so big.
Oh, yeah, the better to see you with, a raspy voice replied.
Oh, and your ears, they too have grown.
Oh, the better to hear you with.
And slowly, Grandma began to lower the blanket. Oh, your nose! It's grown as well.
The better to smell you with.
And finally, Grandma sat up, revealing her whole face. Oh, your mouth! Your sharp teeth!
Yeah, the better to eat you with. The wolf leaped out of the bed towards Little Red Riding Hood, who immediately threw the soup straight into the wolf's face, causing him to howl loudly. Oh!
She then hit his snout with the flowers and ran towards the door. Just as she opened it, in flew her bee friends, who had followed her to Grandma's in order to visit her garden. They swarmed around the wolf, stinging him with all their might. Ow! 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 The wolf howled so loudly, "Ooh!" that Grandma, who he had swallowed whole, came flying out and landed straight onto her bed. The swarm of bees chased the wolf out of the house and deep into the forest. Oh! Ow! 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 Oh! Ow! Oh! Aye! Oh! 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 Ow! A while later, Grandma, now wearing clean pajamas, lay comfortably in her bed with Little Red Riding Hood beside her, holding her hand. Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't have any soup or flowers for you to enjoy.
No, my dear, don't be silly. You brought me the greatest gift of all.
Really? Well, what's that? Grandma smiled. You. And they lived happily ever after. The end. Oh, what a great gift and a great story, too. I will see you next time. Bye-bye. If you like our stories, click on the like button. And if you want to hear more stories, just subscribe to PixieBooks. Hello, children. Have you ever heard of a talking cat? Well, today's storybook has a tale that's about just that. It's called Puss-in-boots. Once upon a time, there was a young man named Carabas. He was very, very poor, and his only possession was a cat, who was also his best and only friend in the world. I have no family, no food, and no money, said Carabas. My life situation is really not funny. And to top it off, my best friend is a cat. Now I ask you, how sad is that? Carabas, how could you say such a thing? Cried Puss the cat. It's a well-known fact that a man's best friend is always his cat. And to prove it, I'm going to help you become happy and rich beyond your wildest dreams. All you have to do is buy me a suit of fine clothing. Puss reminded Carabas of the silver coin that his grandfather had given him for emergency use only. This is an emergency, said Carabas. Buying clothes for my cat? Trust me, said Puss. At the tailor, Puss was fitted with the finest of suits, a frilly jacket, a feathered cap, and long leather boots. Puss smiled and admired herself in the mirror. "Of course," she said, "I'll need a bag to go with this, my dear." The next day, Puss-in-boots, for that's what she called herself now, and Carabas hid in the bushes. Puss put bait into her new bag, some parsley and bread, and soon she captured a rabbit and 2 partridges. "I can't wait," Carabas said happily, "to eat the birds and the rabbit, all 3. But Puss said, "Oh, we won't be eating a thing. The rabbit and the birds are meant for the king." "There's no way the king can be as hungry as me," said Carabas. "No way." "Hey, hey," said Puss, "just trust me, okay?" So they went to the palace, but only Puss was allowed inside. "You see," said Puss, "you're just not dressed for a royal visit." "I see," said Carabas, "but it's not quite fair, is it?" So Puss entered the palace all by herself, and when she returned, she had a story to tell. "I saw the king," she said, "and he was very impressed with my boots, coat, and hat, with the way I was dressed. And he was thrilled when I gave him the birds and the rabbit, with kindest regards from the Marquis Carabas." Now you see, to be a marquis is a special thing. It's almost as special as being a king. "Me, a marquis?" said Carabas. "How can that be?" "Trust me," said Puss. "Okay, but I don't look like a marquis," Carabas said, giving his dirty old clothes a pat. "Don't worry," said Puss. "I'm working on that." For weeks, Puss-in-Boots kept delivering birds and rabbits to the king as gifts from the marquis. "This marquis is a marvelous man," said the king. "I want to meet him just as soon as I can." The king said, "In 3 days' time, I'll be in my carriage, touring the countryside." Puss promised on that date the marquis would be by the pond at the edge of the estate. 3 days later, they went to the pond. Puss told Carabas he'd need a bath if he was to see the king. So Carabas removed everything, from his cap to his socks. But when he jumped in, Puss hid the old rags under some rocks. While Carabas was taking his bath, the king's carriage rolled up the path. Puss cried out, "Help! Oh, help! The marquis is drowning!" The king halted his carriage, and his guards ran to the pond. They pulled out Carabas, who had not a stitch on. Puss told the king that while the marquis was bathing, thieves had stolen all of his clothing. The king kept extra clothes in his carriage, so he gave Puss the finest suit to bring to the poor marquis. Carabas dressed and said, "Puss, look at me. I look like a real marquis." And when the king met the new marquis, he was just as impressed as he could be. "Come," said the king, "for a ride in my carriage, and say hello to my daughter, who's available for marriage." Then, much to the king's delight, the marquis and the princess fell in love at first sight. Puss whispered to Carabas, the marquis, "In 1 hour, bring the king and the princess to the ogre's castle." Carabas was afraid of the ogre, a giant beast with evil magical powers. But by now, he knew he should trust Puss in Boots. So Carabas set off with the king and the princess, while Puss went off to the ogre's castle. Because she was such a well-dressed cat, Puss was immediately granted an audience with the ogre. Puss said she had heard the ogre could transform herself into a creature of any size imaginable. The ogre laughed. "Yes, large or small, yes, I can do them all." Then he changed into a roaring lion, and after that, an elephant. "Oh, it's true," said Puss. "You can become a beast as large as a house, but surely not a tiny creature like, say, a mouse?"
I can do anything,"
cried the ogre, and he became a tiny mouse and ran about the floor. Even though Puss-in-boots was very well dressed, she was still a cat. So she pounced on the mouse, gobbled him up, and that was that. When the royal carriage arrived, Puss in Boots greeted them and said, "Welcome to the castle of the Marquis." The king and the princess couldn't believe their eyes, and Carabas, too, was very surprised. "The castle of the Marquis?" said he. "Well, that would be me. Come on in." And in that castle, the Marquis married the princess, and they and Puss in Boots lived there the rest of their days, happy, well-fed, and very well-dressed. The end. Oh, what a wonderful story! I'll see you next time.
If you have a story that you would like to hear, comment below and I'll ask Storybook to find it.
Hello, children. Hello, Storybook. It appears as if you came flying in on a breeze. Oh, and wouldn't you know it, our story is called The Lad Who Went to the North Wind. Once upon a time, there was a poor old lady who had a son named Lad. Lad means boy, and Lad was a boy, so that's why she named the lad Lad. One day, they were both very hungry, and the old lady sent Lad out to the barn for a bag of flour so she could bake some bread. But when Lad came out of the barn, suddenly the north wind arrived. The north wind loves to play tricks, so he huffed and puffed and blew the flour out of Lad's hands up into the sky. Lad went back into the barn and came out with another bag of flour. Again, the north wind blew it into the sky. That made Lad very mad, so he decided to go to the north wind's house, which was far off in the north. At the north wind's house, Lad cried out, "Hey, North Wind! My name's Lad, and I'm very mad. You stole my flour with your windy power. I want it back. Me and my mommy are very hungry."
"I have no flour,"
said the north wind,
"but I can give you a magic tablecloth. Put the cloth on a table and say, 'Cloth, feed me.' Then the cloth will magically produce all the foods you could ever desire."
"Wow," said Lad. "That sounds like the best tablecloth ever. Forget about the flour. I'll just take the tablecloth."
"Deal,"
said the north wind. Lad took the cloth and started towards home. It was a long walk, so he stopped at an inn for the night. When he went to the dining room for supper, he put the cloth on a table and said, "Cloth, feed me." Magically, the table was filled with delicious dishes. Everyone there was very impressed, especially the innkeeper. That night, when Lad was asleep, the innkeeper crept into his room and stole the magic tablecloth, replacing it with another cloth that looked just like it. The next day, Lad went home to his mother and said, "Mommy, I went to the North Wind's house, and he isn't a bad guy after all. He gave me a magic tablecloth that will provide all the food we'll ever need." The old lady sighed and said, "Oh, a magic tablecloth, huh? Okay, Lad, this I have to see." So Lad put the cloth on the table and cried, "Cloth, feed me." But nothing happened. "Cloth, feed me and my mummy," he cried. "We're very hungry." But no food appeared. Now Lad was extra mad, so he marched back to the North Wind's house. "Hey, North Wind, it's me, Lad, and I'm extra mad," he cried. "That was the worst tablecloth ever. It wasn't magic at all. So give me my flour and I'll be on my way.
I have no flour, lad, said the North Wind. But if you look around back, you'll find a magic ram that can produce 100 gold coins. All you do is say, Ram, Ram, Ram-a-lam-a-ding-dong. Show me the money. Then the gold coins come pouring out.
Wow, said Lad. That sounds like the best ram ever. Forget about the flour. I'll just take the ram.
Deal,
said the North Wind. Lad took the ram and started home. Again, he stopped at the inn for the night. Before sleeping, Lad tested the ram. Ram, ram, ram-a-lam-a-ding-dong, show me the money, he cried. And the ram magically produced 100 gold coins. Lad happily hid the coins under the bed and fell fast asleep. The innkeeper had watched Lad and the ram through a hole in the wall. Again, he crept into Lad's room, stole the coins from under the bed and the magic ram too, replacing it with a ram that looked just like it. In the morning, Lad was so excited to go home. He forgot all about the gold coins under the bed. When he got home, he said, Mummy, the North Wind is a really great guy. He gave me this ram that can magically produce 100 gold coins. The old lady sighed and said, A magic ram, huh? Okay, Lad, this I have to see. Lad cried, Ram, ram, ram-a-lam-a-ding-dong, show me the money. Produce the gold coins. We need money. Ram, come on. Ram. But the ram produced nothing. Now, Lad was especially mad. So, he went to the North Wind's house and cried, Hey, North Wind, it's me, Lad, and I'm especially mad. That was the worst ram ever. It wasn't magic at all. So, give me back my flour and I'll be on my way.
I have no flour, lad, said the North Wind, but I'll give you a magic stick. When you're threatened by an enemy, just say, stick, stick, tickle, stick, tickle till it makes him sick. The stick will tickle your enemy until he's sick from laughing. To stop it, you just say, stop, stick, and that's it.
Wow, said Lad. That sounds like the best stick ever. Forget about the flour. I'll just take the stick.
Deal,
said the North Wind. Lad headed home, stopping again at the inn. However, by now, Lad realized he couldn't trust the innkeeper. So, when he crept into Lad's room to steal the stick, Lad jumped up and cried, Stick, stick, tickle, stick, tickle till it makes him sick. And the magic stick tickled the innkeeper until he was sick from laughing, and he promised to return the tablecloth and the ram. Lad cried, Stop, stick! The tickling stopped, and the innkeeper collapsed. The next morning, Lad started happily home with the magic tablecloth, magic ram, and magic stick. Mummy will be so proud of me, he said, knowing that from then on, she'd always have enough food and enough money. And every now and then, I'll tickle her with the stick just to give her a laugh. The end. Oh, that was a very fine story indeed. See you next time. Bye-bye. You know, sharing is caring, so feel free to share our stories with your friends. Oh, hello, children. Oh, Storybook and I have a classic tale to tell. Are you ready? Oh, wonderful. So are we. The story of Cinderella. Once upon a time, there was a rich merchant whose wife fell ill. As she felt her end drawing near, she called to her beautiful daughter, Oh, my dearest, always be kind and good. and trust that things will work out. Take this locket and keep it close. It will protect you."
Years passed, and the merchant remarried.
His new bride and her 2 daughters came to live with the merchant and his daughter. The merchant was often away on business and entrusted his daughter's care to his new wife. Little did he know that his new wife and stepdaughters were very mean to his daughter. The stepsisters mocked her, while the stepmother forced her to attend to all their needs from morning till night. They even forced her to sleep on a pile of cinders, which stuck to her hair and clothing, and so they named her Cinderella. Poor Cinderella spent her days laboring away. Late at night, she would secretly take out her beloved mother's locket, which she kept in a secret pocket. She would open it and gaze lovingly at her mother's worn-out portrait and cry herself to sleep. One day, the king's messenger arrived and regally announced, "Hear ye, hear ye! The prince is ready to be wed! All maidens are summoned to a special ball at the castle, where the prince, by the midnight hour, will choose his bride." The 2 stepdaughters cried out with excitement, "Oh, I'm sure he'll choose me to be his bride." "You?" the other sister mocked. "Only if he's blind, he's sure to pick me." The stepmother interrupted. "He won't choose either of you if you don't go and prepare yourselves. Hurry now, there's much to be done. Cinderella, don't just stand there like a stump. Prepare their baths and bring out their new dresses. Move it!" The sisters barked out orders while their mother oversaw it all, making sure that her daughters were fit for a prince. Finally, they all stood at the doorway ready to leave when Cinderella whispered, "Can I go too, please?" "You? Go to the ball? Oh, we'd be the laughing stock of the kingdom. No, Cinderella, attend to your chores." And with that, the stepmother slammed the door. Cinderella dropped to her knees and burst out crying. Tears streamed down her dusty cheeks and down onto her ragged dress. One tear made it all the way to her mother's locket. The locket began to shake, buzzing with energy. Startled, Cinderella slowly took it out. The locket glowed brightly. Suddenly, it opened, and swirls of twinkling light danced about the room until finally a smiling old woman wearing a sparkling dress magically appeared. "Oh, hello, Cinderella. I am your guardian angel." Cinderella was shocked. But how? No time to explain. You have a ball to attend." And with a wave of her hands, rainbow sparkles swirled around Cinderella, transforming her appearance from head to toe. "Ooh, not bad. Take a look in the mirror." Cinderella looked and was amazed, especially by the crystal slippers she now wore. "Thank you. Oh, thank you so much." "That's what guardian angels are for. And now, there's only one little thing. The magic will wear off by the last chime of midnight. Now, go and have yourself a ball." A short time later, Cinderella arrived at the ball. When the grand doors opened before her, she stood in awe of all the splendor. Everyone immediately caught sight of her radiant beauty, and especially the prince, whose heart skipped a beat. He approached. "It would be such an honor to dance with you." Cinderella blushed, curtsied, and replied, "The honor would be mine." The prince danced with Cinderella all through the night, deeply moved not only by her beautiful appearance, but even more so captivated by the light shining in her eyes. Finally, the music stopped, and the king stood up and called for attention.
The midnight hour is upon us.
Cinderella looked at the clock, which began to chime, and gasped.
Son, have you made your choice?
I have, father, said the prince. He then turned towards Cinderella, shocked to discover that she was gone. He saw her rushing out the door. Stop, he cried, and rushed after her. By the time he reached the steps of the castle, she was nowhere to be found. He then noticed something twinkling on the ground. It was her crystal slipper, which had slipped off her foot as she ran off. The next day, the prince set out with a small entourage to find his lost love. He went from door to door, having every maiden try on the crystal slipper. When he arrived at Cinderella's home, he was greeted by the stepmother and her 2 daughters. The first sister shoved her foot forcefully, even banging it into the wall, but as hard as she tried, it was too small. The other sister, realizing that the slipper was too big, tried to secretly stuff it with a silk cloth, but was caught in the act. The prince let out a sigh and walked out the door. However, one of the prince's aides caught sight of a woman clearing cinders out of the fireplace. You there? It was proclaimed that every maiden is to try on the slipper. Come on! Cinderella stepped forward shyly and slipped her foot gracefully into the slipper, which fit perfectly. Everyone gasped. The aide called out to the prince, "My lord, we found her!" The prince rushed back into the room and stood before Cinderella, and despite all the dust and grime, recognized the light shining in her eyes. To the great shock of the stepmother and sisters, the prince kneeled before Cinderella and asked for her hand in marriage. Cinderella felt the locket softly shake in her pocket. She smiled and said yes, and they lived happily ever after. The end. Don't you just love a good love story? Okay then, see you next time. Bye-bye. Hello, children. Are you ready for a story? Oh, fantastic. Perfect timing, storybook. Today's story is called The Little Match Girl. This story is a special one because some people think it's sad, while other people think it's happy. No one can seem to settle it. Once upon a time, a little girl lived with her parents in a small house in the city. It was the coldest New Year's Eve in years. The roof of their home had holes in it that they had stuffed with rags, but still the icy wind got in. Brrr. Sadly, the little girl and her parents were not only cold, but very hungry, for they hadn't eaten in days. The little girl decided she would go out and sell some matches so she could buy food for her family. She loved them dearly, and seeing them suffer broke her little heart. Her parents didn't want her to go out in the cold, but the little girl was determined. Her mother said, "If you must go, at least wear my slippers to keep your feet warm." They're much too big, but they're better than nothing." The little girl set out into the icy streets with a bundle of matches to sell. New Year's Eve parties were happening in the houses all along the street. Warm candlelight spilled from the windows of the homes, along with smells of delicious food, including her favorite roasted chicken. Yum! She was crossing the street when suddenly a carriage charged by. The horses knocked her backwards into a snowbank, and the slippers fell right off her feet. Before she could get up, a stray dog ran over, snatched the slippers in his mouth, and disappeared down an alley. The little girl was too weak to chase the dog, but she was not going to give up. She wandered shivering through the night, crying, "Matches for sale?" But no one bought any. The snow kept falling and the wind howled. The little girl's feet were completely numb. her fingers aching and her ears stinging from the biting chill. She thought of going home, but when she looked around, the snow was so thick that she was lost. She couldn't call her parents because back then, phones hadn't been invented. She finally collapsed in the corner next to a mansion, huddled up against the brick walls in hope of escaping the wind. She struck a match against the brick and warmed her fingers over the bright flame. Then, the strangest thing happened. Right there before her eyes appeared a huge fireplace with a crackling, joyous fire that warmed her all over. But the match quickly burned out, and she was left once again in the dark and cold. The fireplace was gone. She struck a second match, and this time she could see right through the bricks into an elegant dining room. There was a long table with a crisp white cloth and beautiful dishes piled with every kind of food she could desire. In the middle was a perfectly roasted chicken. The chicken floated towards her, but just as she reached for it, the match went out. In its place was the cold, wet wall. She lit another match, and this time she saw the biggest and most beautiful of holiday trees, sparkling with pure magic and lights. Those lights reached so high into the sky that they became stars. Just as the flame went out, she saw one of the stars fall. This reminded her of her grandmother, who had always told her that falling stars granted wishes. She missed her grandmother terribly, but when she lit another match, her grandmother was right there smiling at her with rosy cheeks, wearing a toasty shawl. "Grandmother, don't go!" the little girl cried as the match went out. Determined to keep her grandmother near, she scraped the whole handful of matches against the bricks. This time, when her grandmother appeared, she gathered the little girl up in her warm, soft arms. Together, they floated up towards the stars, where there was no hunger, cold, or sadness, just love, peace, and joy. The next morning, on New Year's Day, the little girl woke up and was astonished to find herself wrapped in a blanket in front of the fireplace at home. Her parents were sitting nearby in the glow of the crackling fire with steaming cups of coffee. Strangest of all was the smell of delicious roasting chicken. She looked around for her grandmother, but instead saw the lady from next door. She realized her grandmother was just a dream, but this neighbor had found her, carried her home, and shared firewood and food with her family. She still missed her grandmother, but her heart and belly were filled by the neighbor's kindness that saved her life. The end. So, friends, what do you think? Is this story happy, sad, or both? That's for you to decide. Bye-bye.
Did you like this story? Ho-ho! So let me know by clicking on the thumbs up.